Welcome, folks. I am Jabby Koway, joined by ACHARA, the big silly KIRK.
Hello.
We're looking at House of the Dragon, Episode 4 breakdown from Screencrush, Easter eggs, and ending explained. Ooh la la, I love endings explains. You guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications. Pretty please vote the sucker up. Let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching while you're subscribing and upvoting. Subscribe to Screencrush. There's a link in the description below if you want to click on that link, give the original video an upvote, subscribe to them from there. Here we go.
I will do my duty there. I'm with Zelena. But you must first do yours as king.
Welcome back to Screencrush. I'm Renayra, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Episode 4 of House of the Dragon. Renayra is on a tour of Westeros, but it's...
I love the modesty that you might have missed.
Yeah,
see the sights. Despite King Viserys now having a male heir in the form of young Prince Aegon II, Renayra is still the heir to the Iron Throne, but her life is not her own, and she is expected to now choose a husband. So the very first thing we see in this episode is Renayra fingering the Valyrian steel necklace that her uncle Damon gave her in the pilot. She does this as a line of suitors wait for her, and right away we see what Renayra is expected to do clashes with what her heart really wants. As the heir, she has to be responsible, which is completely at odds with the side of her that just wants to ride her dragon into battle like her uncle Damon. So many suitors. Sounds like my Friday night. Doug, Friday night we watched Legend of Black Cauldron. Continue. Giving her counsel in this scene is Boremund Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End and head of House Baratheon in this time period. Now the Baratheons and the Targaryens have been close for a while, with Orys Baratheon serving as the very first Hands of the King under Aegon the Conqueror. Boremund is the cousin of Queen Rhaenys, the queen who never was. Now this is likely why he asked for her favor during the tournament and the premiere. As you'll remember, a Baratheon will eventually end the reign of House Targaryen.
I'll kill every Targaryen I get my hands on.
And Robert's reign was legitimized because he was a distant relative of the Targaryens. Now we can't confirm it, but due to him advising Renayra and the bleak look of this hall and the ongoing sound of storms outside, we think that this scene is taking place at Storm's End. Online we can see members of House Hightower as well as House Tully. The old Lord Don Darian of Blackhaven, in the middle of his attempt at wooing, mentions Dornish incursions. Now these were continuing problems for Aegon the Conqueror and almost every Targaryen since. Lord Don Darian has to pause for a drink, which gives Renayra a chance to trade glances with the far sexier Sir Criston Cole. If she weren't a princess, these two probably would have gotten it on back in the woods in episode 3.
Yep.
So I guess we were right that there was always tension there. I mean,
Duh.
Yes, we all knew that.
You'd have to be blind and dumb not to
Well, we
be
all
able
thought
to
it was
see
going to
the
happen there in the
tension.
woods. We all thought that was going to happen.
But it didn't, because he was still trying to be a good boy.
Yes.
And she was so much younger then, remember?
That's right.
Yeah. So
one whole episode ago.
Yeah, one whole episode ago. I thought she was 21. A bunch of people said in the comments that she's 18. Still, that's fine. Hormones racing, ready to go. And go she did.
Something that further loads this look is the fact that Sir Criston is the son of Lord Don Darian's steward. Lord Don Darian mentions a visit from Queen Allison, who was the wife of King Jaehaerys I. That's the king that was before Viserys that we briefly saw in the premiere. Allison was also a dragon rider who flew on a dragon called Silverwing. In the book, A Feast for Crows, Samwell Tarly recalls how Jaehaerys and Allison once visited the Wall, and he wonders if Silverwing may have left an egg there. Queen Allison was Rhaenyra's great-grandmother, and the visit that's being talked about was a century ago. So this guy's like far too old for Rhaenyra's taste, and he ends up being laughed at.
This was half a century ago, Princess.
Yes, it was.
Hey, Don Darian, that sounds familiar.
Yes, because we met Beric Dondarrion before. This guy.
Yes. The guy with it, that's
the
right.
The next contender is a kid.
The flaming sword. Yes, the Red Priest. Yeah, I was wondering why that name. I was like, no, there's something. I recognize the name, but it's been so long since I've read the books and obviously watched the show and stuff that I didn't click.
So we go from one extreme to the next. He's a member of House Blackwood and mentions how his house helped Aegon I in his conquering of Westeros. He gets mocked for this, but he isn't wrong. His family from the Riverlands assisted Aegon very early on in his conquest, including the fight against Harren the Black. Harren the Black had the largest castle in Westeros, Harrenhal, and after Aegon's dragons attacked it, it became the burned out husk that we saw in episode 1. So it was Aegon's dragon Balerion who really finished that fight, and House Blackwood didn't have that much to do with it, so the kid deserved to get a good ribbing.
The Blackwoods truly turned the tide on that one.
Because the Baratheon suitor knows that his house played a much larger role in the conquest. So Renayra has officially had enough of this entire tour of suitors and makes to leave just when violence breaks out in the hall. A Baratheon is run through and spits up blood as she leaves. Now Criston Cole tries to keep her from watching. Again, we're seeing people try to shield Renayra from bloodshed, but we've already seen that she does not shy away from violence.
Yeah.
If you like king
Jesus.
So this episode begins with bloodshed over the throne. Maybe a sign of things to come. But these two are more fighting for their own honor, which is much more important and more dangerous in Westeros. So the princess has rejected every suitor and ends her tour prematurely. She's endured as much duty as she possibly can. She yearns to fly like the dragon that she is, and to drive that point home, she immediately sees Damon fly back to King's Landing on Caraxes. So when Damon returns, Viserys brings out all the pomp and circumstance. He dons his crown, he has his Valyrian steel sword Blackfire by his side, which by the way also used to belong to Aegon the Conqueror. And most of the King's Guard and the entire court is present in this room. He's obviously unhappy when he sees that Renayra is present because she must have paused her appearances on The Bachelorette. Viserys pulls out every symbol and trick he can in order to show Damon that he is the king and that he is in charge. But Damon doesn't need to do any of that. He just saunters in like he owns the place with the most controversial haircut since Felicity.
I don't think it's so bad. I just think it's a different look.
He drops the crab feeder's hammer on the floor and tells Viserys,
add it to the chair.
Now this is a reference to how the Iron Throne came into being. Aegon the Conqueror gathered all the swords from his conquered foes and had them forged into the prickly chair that we're now seeing.
Do you know, or you guys, do you know, if at any point in history there was actually a throne chair made out of fallen enemies' swords? Is that actually a thing, or did George R.R. Martin just make that up?
I have not heard of this before, but I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to world history. So.
All right, well, I'm just curious.
Now Viserys is no Aegon, but Damon treats him as if he is. The Triarchy has given him his crown and named him King of the Narrow Sea. But instead of boasting of this, as Viserys seems to expect, Damon hands the crown and title over to his king and bends the knee. It is a rare act of supplication to his brother.
But I know that there is only one true king, Your Grace.
Viserys doesn't care whether this is an act or a ploy. He misses his brother and he hugs him in front of everyone. He doesn't belittle Damon's deeds, he thanks him for them. They don't walk out of the hall as king and subject, they walk out like brothers. Again, this is Viserys' greatest strength and his greatest flaw as a ruler. He always wants to make peace. So this brotherly love continues in the party that follows, and an inebriated Viserys seems happier than he's been in a long time now that his brother's returned and he isn't acting like a twerp. But Otto, not liking this rekindled relationship at all. Remember, this guy is very anti-Damon and warned that he would be another Maegor the Cruel. Viserys mentions how Damon was always their mother's favorite, a reference to Alyssa Targaryen. Damon's a warrior and a dragon rider, where Viserys stopped riding dragons after the death of Balerion the Black Dread. Queen Allison shows her age and how she can't compete with this brotherly bond, and Viserys even goes out of his way to look cool in front of his bro at her expense.
Would you like to see the tapestry? He has no interest in such things.
This is a castle, isn't it? There are tapestries.
Renayra shows interest in seeing them, possibly extending a bit of kindness to Alicent, and Viserys tells her that she should not
deprive yourself.
Now that line sparks her rebellion for this entire episode. The brothers are friends again, so Queen Alicent tries to find common ground once again with her best friend slash stepdaughter, Renayra.
Why did that send her into a state of rebellion for the rest of the episode?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
He explained the order of events, but I didn't understand, the exact igniting point.
Well, probably because this whole time she's being deprived of her freedom. In a way, she feels like she doesn't have equal rights as the guys. She's just deprived from doing whatever she wants to do. So her dad's like, don't deprive yourself. She's like, yeah, whatever. Watch me. I'm going to do what I want. Watch me fly.
I'm not sure I understand any better. But
I don't know. I'm trying here. I'm reaching.
The brothers are friends again, so Queen Alicent tries to find common ground once again with her best friend slash stepdaughter, Renayra. But deep down, Alicent is jealous that Renayra gets to make her own choices, as her marriage was mostly decided for her thanks to Otto. Renayra accidentally insults her.
How romantic it must be to get imprisoned in a castle and me to squeeze out to heirs.
Yeah,
and immediately she
apologizes.
apologizes. But still, this offhand remark cuts deep because, aside from nailing the king every now and then, this is Alicent's only real purpose in life. Alicent feels lonely, so she doesn't want Renayra to be a stepdaughter. She wants her friend back. But Alicent doesn't see that Renayra also feels just as trapped. She feels like she doesn't have agency. So both of these women have paths in life that are not their own choosing. But still, Alicent is jealous that Renayra has any agency at all, and she can at least choose her own suitor. This is all laying the groundwork for a festering resentment that will be exploited years later. Damon's newly shorn long.
Does anyone actually feel any kind of freedom? Does anybody? If Renayra feels trapped, Viserys feels trapped, Damon feels trapped in all of the things that he's being told to do by his king. He's very rebellious, but he's still kind of confined to what he's allowed to do and whatnot, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's different levels to it, right? I mean, if you want to get philosophical, it's are we actually really free if we decide to participate in society and follow the rules laid out for us and follow the path of what our family or whoever.
Well, you're still bound by the rules of your stomach and your butt at the end of the day. So, gotta poop sometimes, gotta eat sometimes.
Sure.
Damon's newly shorn locks and new attitude may be fooling most of the court, but Renayra knows him all too well and isn't buying the act. He represents her wild side, and she's probably the only family that he actually cares about. He says that he came back for the comforts of home, but Renayra is probably the only comfort that he actually cares about. For instance, he notes that Renayra has matured.
See, we were talking about that. Remember in our breakdown, because you were like, some of the conversation got cut out, but you called out how he said he came back for the comforts of home, but then Renayra pointed out that that's a lie.
Yeah.
To you, that was further illustrating that all of this was a ploy. I was arguing that maybe the ploy was her, not necessarily for the kingdom, but just her. Like he has, interest in her.
Either way, with his actions, he was trying to get her, whether or not it was just for the purposes of like, I want to bone my niece, or whether
that sounds so wrong.
It sounds
yes.
wrong, right? Yeah. Or get married to my niece. Does that sound a bit better?
Or for power.
Yeah.
And their looks to each other are more charged than ever before. For Damon, marriage is no big deal. It's a political arrangement, nothing more. And that's easy for him to say because it's not the same for women.
Man,
he continues to have nothing but disdain for his wife in the Vale, but because he's a man and a prince, he can do as he likes and bed anyone who strikes his fancy. This is not lost on Renayra. Being married can be a death sentence. Her own mother had to produce heirs until it literally killed her. Once again, Renayra is unwilling to accept the same fate. Alicent, in contrast, has somewhat gone along with this. See, this episode really cuts to the heart of this series, which is the question, can a woman in Westeros have agency? Or, like Damon says, she has no desire to live in fear, even at the cost of her duties as heir to the Iron Throne. But it's not like men can always choose who they marry. Like, look at Viserys. And we've already seen in Westeros that refusing a potential match has far-reaching consequences, especially breaking an engagement that was already agreed upon.
Red wedding, lots of stabbing, a bit of beheading. The reigns of Castamere are here to stay.
Viserys never agreed to marry Lyanna Velaryon, but Lord Corlys is still upset about the slight. His pride has been hurt, and he's negotiating with the Sea Lord of Braavos. We traveled there a few times during Game of Thrones. But we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that the greatest character ever written by George R.R. Martin also comes from that place, and that was the first sword of Braavos.
Yeah.
I am Sirio Forel.
And you will be speaking to me with more respect.
And what do we say to the god of death?
Not today. So Corlys is desperate to unite his house to anything, even a mailbox. So now he's trying to fix up his daughter Lyanna with a Sea Lord of Braavos, which would give way to a new dangerous alliance. So this is a problem, and Viserys will have a solution to it later on that's going to make everyone unhappy. That night, we see how different the lives of two young ladies can be. Queen Alicent has gone down the expected path, and Renayra is about to enter the danger zone. So repeatedly cuts back and forth between them, highlighting how different their respective life choices are. In her chambers, Alicent has a screaming baby to deal with. Renayra gets to her chambers and finds a set of boy clothes and a map to a hidden passageway that allows her to get out of her room unseen.
I didn't realize the parallels were happening until the lovemaking started.
Yeah, that's true. It took until that point where it was like really clear.
Juxtaposing it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay. Alicent looks miserable and Renayra looks like she's having a grand old time.
We're trying to anyway.
Yeah. Boinkity boink.
See, King's Landing is filled with secret passageways that were commissioned by Maegor the Cruel. And after the Red Keep was built, he had all of the stonemasons in the city executed, so only he would know the castle's secrets. So now, in true Arya Stark fashion,
terrible.
I'm not a girl.
Yes, you are.
she dresses like a boy and creeps out through the castle. She walks right past the skull of Balerion, which was where her father entrusted her to keep the secret of Aegon's dream, the Song of Ice and Fire. She skirts past this like the curious mouse that we see on the statue above her, and that mouse also parallels the rodent that Allison sees above her bed. Both mice are perched on objects that symbolize the duty of these women. For Renayra, that duty is the call to be a dragon rider, a queen, the person to fulfill Aegon's dream. And for Alicent, that call to duty is to make babies for a man.
I was wondering what the symbolism there.
Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but actually that makes a lot of sense.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I just need something.
She finds Damon waiting for her, once again the opposite of everything that she just scattered past. He's going to take her into the depths of King's Landing to show her a sexy life free of fear and duty. Now, Damon is well known in the lower parts of King's Landing. He was called the Prince of the City, the Lord of Flea Bottom, because he spent so much time partying with the proles. When someone calls Renayra a boy, she smiles, because she likes that small taste of male privilege. Alicent, meanwhile, gets to bathe Viserys. She treats him with kindness, but this is only ever going to be a union of obligation. Viserys' one true love was Aemma Arryn, Targaryen, and she is dead. Meanwhile, Renayra and Damon take in some street pantomime, which made us recall Arya doing the same thing in Bravos.
Ned Stark will soon feel fortune's sting, and I will be Hand of the King.
And
see, I didn't remember that scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was a reference to Thor Ragnarok. Clearly. So obvious.
Okay, so obvious. Okay.
And the street theater tells us a lot about how the little folk feel about the royal family.
Right.
Although Aegon Part 2 is only 3 years old, he's the more popular choice for the throne with the common folk because he's a boy. Damon tells her that the thinking of the small folk matters a great deal. It's only when they assume to be one of them that they can get the truth. Something similar to what Shakespeare dramatizes with Henry V the night before the Battle of Agincourt.
I think he would not wish himself anywhere but where he is.
Then I would he were here alone.
So Renayra wants to be free of her obligations, but she does not yet understand that these obligations also come with privilege. She takes food off of a tray like it's already hers, not realizing that down here, you have to pay for your food.
Yeah.
She goes on a run of excitement through the streets, pursued by Damon. Now Allison, meanwhile, has a cup of wine, all alone. This lonely life has already driven her to start drinking like another lonely queen, Cersei. Later on, she is told that Cyrus has requested her presence, but it's not really a request at all. Damon and Renayra delve even deeper into human pleasures.
Given what he just mentioned, do you think it's possible that Allison will become kind of like Cersei in that she's like this crazy ruler?
Obviously, I didn't get very far in the book, but from what I have been hearing from
The rumor mill?
from people who do breakdowns and stuff like that, it seems like the relationship between Allison and Renayra is going to become very strained. Ryan even mentioned earlier on in the video that Allison will use some information against her at a future point. Yeah, I mean, anyone can change, right? With the circumstances
Not me.
that you're living.
I'm exactly who I was 20 years ago, god dang it.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Entering a brothel where we are now going to censor everything. While Allison is having the opposite experience, laying still like a brood sow with no agency at all. Now notice Viserys' bare back is riddled with scars from sitting a little too comfortably on the Iron Throne. This is not a good symbol for the strength of his reign. So these two sex scenes tell you everything you need to know about these two women. Allison is forced to give, while Damon says the brothel is a place.
Let people come to take what they want.
And later, Renayra will be on top of Sir Criston.
Yeah. She took the power.
She has all the power and agency in their relationship, the opposite of Allison's position. So it is nice to actually see a woman get to enjoy sex on Game of Thrones. Daenerys did, with a guy who turned out to be her nephew for one instance, and Missandei did, Cersei did, and let's not forget this.
I don't ever want to leave this cave, Jon Snow.
This might be news to Renayra, who is still haunted by her own mother being treated like a baby-making machine. So what do Damon and Renayra want? They want each other. It doesn't matter that they're related or there's a big age difference. They are Targaryens. And if you're freaked out by this, you should be. Though Targaryens keeping it the family was hinted at in the very first episode of Game of Thrones. The Church of the Seven Gods ended up saying that it was okay for Targaryens to intermarry because Targaryens were thought to be above mortal men. And Damon pretty much sums up the entire episode with this line. Right, as things start to really go off and Renayra looks into Damon's eyes with something close to love, he breaks things off and leaves. If you ask us, it's because this is not just another fling for him. Damon has real feelings for Renayra.
See? Called it. I said it.
You said he felt guilty.
That too. Also, you know, it's not just the Targaryens who do the incestuous stuff. Lannisters also did some incestuous stuff. And they made like 8 babies or something.
No. Cersei was like, well, the Lannisters did it. Why can't we? That was her justification.
Cersei is a Lannister.
Yeah. You said that the Lannisters did it too, which they did. Her justification was, well, the Targaryens did it. So why can't we do it too?
Okay. You just had a little bit of a Freudian slip, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What
said,
did I say?
You said, Cersei said, the Lannisters did it, why can't we? And I'm like, I'm confused. I thought she is a Lannister.
No, sorry. I've had very little sleep.
Yeah, me too, but I still heard your mistake. Ha!
She is seen by a little boy as she leaves the brothel, and he immediately runs off. So we're reminded a little bit of Varys and his little birds, which are everywhere in King's Landing.
Called us his little birds. He gave us sweets.
She returns to her room without any disguise and passes Sir Criston Cole for a second time. Her lessons from Damon have had an effect on her because Renayra proceeds to get Sir Criston into her room and takes what she wants.
That music's so...
Yeah.
We heard that people in the King's Guard had to be chased.
They do, Doug. He broke the rules. So the little bird that we saw was news of what they saw at the Otto Hightower, but we're not so sure this kid is working directly for Otto. The next day, a greatly hungover Damon wakes up in a room with his mistress Mysaria. Now, we see her receiving money from a kid, which leads us to think that she is, at least in part, a little part of the bird network that is informing Otto. In Martin's lore, Mysaria goes on to become a mistress of whispers herself, so she remains a character that we need to watch out for. See, Mysaria is no longer a prostitute. She is a woman who, unlike Alicent, has found a way to have agency in her own life that has nothing to do with her reproductive capabilities. When Otto tells Viserys the news about Renayra and Damon being seen together in a brothel, he can barely get the words out. Now, it's kind of hard to tell if he's truly concerned here or if he's just putting on a really good act. If Renayra had sex with Damon, she would no longer be a viable candidate for marriage and would no longer be an appropriate candidate for heir to the Iron Throne. Her replacement would be Aegon II, Otto's grandson, which would definitely seem to play directly into his plans. So, we're gonna lean towards him feigning concern here because nobody saw Damon and Renayra having sex. They didn't see it because they didn't do it. Just as Damon listened in on a small council meeting in the premiere, Alicent listens into this entire conversation. Otto refuses to give up his trusted sources of information, which again makes us think that he is not just being informed by a group of kids. Someone else, like Mysaria, is likely the trusted source and is the one who is telling him what the little birds are saying.
Do you guys think that it was all feigned? I would love to know, because I thought that there was some genuine... He looked like he was being genuine in that moment. Like, he really was feeling, you know, a bit of compassion towards the king for the news he had to convey, because he knew that the king wouldn't take it, you know, very well.
Yeah, that is tough, because on the one hand, then fine, don't tell the king then if you think it's going to hurt him. Let him live under the illusion that his only daughter is perfect and innocent. But then on the other hand, his job as the Hand means that he has to tell the king hard news.
Viserys dismisses the entire thing as a lie, just as Tywin Lannister refused to acknowledge the truth about Cersei and Jaime.
And put an end to the disgusting rumors about you, once and for all.
He then accuses Otto of the same thing that I just did. He's trying to ruin Rhaenyra's reputation so Aegon II is made heir. The trust between Viserys and Otto is broken and may be irreparable. Otto is already hatching new plots in his head as he leaves. This episode began with the rekindled relationships between Rhaenyra and Alicent and between Viserys and Damon. But by the end of the episode, all of these dynamics have changed again. Alicent isn't looking at Rhaenyra as a friend at all, but as a reluctant stepmother and a queen. She all but orders her to tell the truth, a far cry from the "I miss you" talk that they had before. Rhaenyra denies the allegations.
I swear this to you, upon the memory of my mother. Damon never touched me.
I mean, they didn't have sex, but he definitely touched her. It doesn't matter though, because Alicent gets even more high and mighty and fully talks like a stepmother, going on about how important a successful marriage is for Rhaenyra. But this is also because Alicent is jealous that Rhaenyra is getting to do whatever she wants. Another juxtaposition happens when Damon staggers into the city drunk, having lost all of his swagger. He's taken to see Viserys in the throne room, and the king needs no symbols of power this time. He has no sword, no audience, and no crown. The room is empty except for the two brothers. A complete contrast to their first scene. Damon isn't just on his knees, he's splayed out on the floor. Viserys, giving into his baser nature, just kicks him repeatedly.
You defiled her.
Cyrus thinks that Renayra...
I did not pick up on all of these, like, the contrasting parallels there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely noticed them, but it was more in the sense of, like, I was more like, oh, okay, don't actually have an audience because no one can know that this happened, you know, between them, or that this happened to her. But I didn't make that
clear of a connection.
Like, that connection.
Viserys thinks that Rhaenyra could be spoiled now, but Damon speaks the truth when he asks him what difference does it make what any lord thinks. He goes one further, saying that he wants to marry her himself, taking a second wife. He uses Aegon the Conqueror as an example. He had two sisters and he married them both. He married Visenya for duty, but Martin wrote that he married Rhaenys for love. So Damon already has a wife out of duty. So invoking this history would mean that he would be marrying Rhaenyra for love. When Damon says that he and Renayra being together will return House Targaryen to its former glory, Viserys makes a good point when he says this would also bring Damon closer to the Iron Throne. So is that Damon's angle, or does he truly love Renayra? Seven hells, who knows what's going on with him? All we know for sure is that he likes to quote Princess Bride while lying on the floor.
As you wish, brother. As you wish.
The happiest duo on this series has somehow become Viserys and Alicent. She believes that Renayra is still a maiden, even though Viserys is kind of struggling with this. Everyone is so concerned about what happened with Damon that that no one's thinking twice about Sir Criston Cole, who never leaves her side. When Renayra finally goes to talk to her father, she sees the famous dagger getting hot in the flames. So the legacy of the Targaryens, and possibly the future itself, is heating up. She almost picks it up, but Viserys stops her before she can. She doesn't possess this dagger just yet. So then we get a little bit more dagger history. It once belonged to Aegon the Conqueror, and before that it belonged to Aenar Targaryen, also known as Aenar the Exile.
Has it been established that Daenerys is the only one who can touch fire and not feel pain, or is that a Targaryen thing?
I believe it's maybe a Targaryen thing because they are dragon riders.
Okay.
I might be wrong. Please correct me.
Because my feeling when he said, don't touch that, was that she might get burned. Then I was like, wait, she wouldn't get burned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was more like, that's a precious object and it's not for you to touch right now.
And before that, it belonged to Aenar Targaryen, also known as Aenar the Exile. He moved his entire family and all of his dragons to Dragonstone after his daughter, Daenerys the Dreamer, foresaw the doom of Valyria. So Viserys goes into more detail about Aegon's vision. Before his death, Valyrian pyromancers carved his prophecy into the steel.
A secret now that only fire can tell.
It reads,
From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire.
Awesome. Yes, very awesome. The Prince That Was Promised addition to this prophecy is another major lift from Martin's lore. On Game of Thrones, it was a prophecy that involved the Lord of Light and Melisandre believing that the person in question was Stannis, Father of the Year Baratheon. Now the books weave in the prince being the reincarnation of Azor Ahai, a warrior of light.
Merikivio dolalaris os machagon contas. The prince who is promised will bring the dawn.
So we don't really know where this storyline is going in Martin's books because, well, they're not finished yet. But we do know that the translation from High Valyrian might actually be gender neutral, so it could be either a prince or a princess.
Proper translation for that prophecy would be the prince or princess who was promised will bring the dawn.
On television, Melisandre decided Jon Snow was the one to fulfill this prophecy after meeting him. And as he's a stealth Targaryen, it still kind of makes sense. But this translation also opens it up for Daenerys to be a candidate as well. Or they could both be the prince that was promised. In the book A Clash of Kings, Daenerys hears the prophecy in the House of the Undying from the image of a man that she believes to be her dead brother, Rhaegar Targaryen. So the books may do things differently, but this series has now fully established that this entire prophecy came from Aegon the Conqueror and was recorded in the fire on his dagger. The reason that Viserys is really so upset about Renayra acting out is that he trusted her with this responsibility, with the most important secret that any Targaryen ruler is privy to.
The burden of this knowledge, it is larger than the throne.
And that burden should take precedence over her own desires. So Viserys isn't going to disinherit her or bump Aegon II into her place. He is going to make her marry Laenor Velaryon, and this will be a marriage of obligation that also fulfills a diplomatic crisis. The union of the Targaryens and the Velaryons that Lord Corlys wanted in episode 2 might happen after all. Viserys says,
The House of the Dragon will stand as one for a further generation. He said it! He said it!
So Renayra realizes finally that all of this is bigger than her, no matter how unfair it is. So she agrees to do what is expected. She will comply, but not before warning her dad about Otto Hightower's machinations. She believes that all these rumors came from him. So because nobody in this episode is allowed to escape happy, Otto is called before Viserys. He talks about his father, Balon Targaryen, the former heir to Jaehaerys I. He was the writer of the Great Dragon Vhagar, originally written by Queen Visenya during Aegon's conquest. Balon the Brave is the reason why Viserys named his son Balon, though the heir for a day didn't live for long. Balon was made hand to the king under Jaehaerys, but became sick during a hunt and died of a burst belly only 5 days after taking the position. The loss of Balon was a huge blow for Jaehaerys, but it was great for Otto Hightower, who became the new hand to the king. He ruled when Jaehaerys was taken ill and remained in the position when Viserys was crowned. Viserys throws this history in Otto's face, and Otto says that it was a duty. Is that what it was, or was he scheming his way to power? Was Alicent a well-calculated diversion? Viserys doesn't know, and he doesn't care. He strips Otto of his position.
I don't think Otto is going to go quietly.
Well, his grandson is a potential heir to the Iron Throne, so no, he is not going quietly. We have not seen the last of Otto.
Otto!
And just to show how little agency Renayra has, the Grand Maester delivers a special tea to her. They don't name it, but this is Moon Tea, a medicine that Martin writes of in the books.
It will rid you of any unwanted consequences.
He doesn't stay to watch her drink it. The episode closes, and Renayra is just looking at the tea that will relieve her of a potential child of her Kingsguard. Now,
That's true.
compare this to another object given to her by a man, her necklace. The episode begins with Renayra touching her necklace, and it ends with her staring at the tea. The necklace symbolizes freedom, agency, whereas the tea symbolizes a kind of freedom, a duty, an obligation to use her reproductive organs for the good of the realm. So we only have one episode left with Millie Alcock and Emily Carey in the roles of Renayra and Alicent. They're going to be aged up after that. So expect the next episode to really cement who these characters are and to lay the groundwork for the rest of the series. But right now, everything sucks for everyone in King's Landing. Damon, as usual, says it best. That's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter.
I loved that. I always enjoy like the kind of more literary analysis of the shows and the episodes.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
It is, because the imagery isn't just there because it looks pretty. When you break it down like that, you start to see more things in the story that the writers want us to know.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was really, really thorough. I mean, especially for a pedestrian like myself who hasn't read any of the books and haven't read as much as you have. Yeah, I enjoy being told as a stupid person what's going on.
Stupid. Don't say you're stupid. But yeah, it's really fun, and it's just kind of inspired me to look a little bit deeper as we're watching the episodes to see if I can pick up anything on my own.
I didn't realize just how nicely woven this episode was until he broke it down.
Yeah.
I didn't realize just like the contrast between like the bookends of things.
I had a little inkling of, it being about the juxtaposition between the two women and their lives. Alicent's lack of agency in her own life, her lack of freedom, versus Renayra's perceived freedom.
Right. I mean, subconsciously I understood that, but like even Damon's arrival versus his departure.
Yeah, that was pretty insightful.
Yeah,
how he broke it down.
All that stuff was super fun. Has the books ever alluded to the notion that there was like babies that?
No, I mean, I don't know.
Like
Obviously,
babies that came out kind of weird or wonky because of all the incestuous stuff.